Hello, lovely people. Welcome to the show. My guest today is a very multi-talented individual, mainly known by her presence in the art world in many different mediums. She currently works as a chef and has had her own show on local radio, so what a perfect guest to have on. Please welcome Yujin Shin.
Home Audio Entertainment.
9016 Radio.
The show for artists of all kinds.
Sit down, relax, enjoy the music.
Oh, okay, man, it's your turn.
So how did you get into radio?
How
long have you been on the radio for? Are you still doing your radio shows?
I'm not doing radio anymore because I'm not a student anymore. But
True. Oh, is that was that like the prerequisite to be on
well,
Radio 1?
It's like a student radio station. So most of the DJs and stuff, or like the volunteers, are students. But I guess I didn't really think of it as something that I would be interested in. But I mean, I've always been pretty passionate about music, like Dunedin music and New Zealand music in general. And my friend at the time, worked there at the time, and she was a music director there. And she just kind of pushed me towards applying applying for a volunteer position, because you have to like fill out some kind of like application form and like curate a playlist that you would play if you were to have a show on Radio 1. And then my friend Hennessy Griffiths also was applying around the same time, and then we were like, we should do a show together. Yeah.
Cool.
So we did that for a couple of years, and now she's the music director there, and I have gone in a completely different direction in my life, and now I work in hospitality.
Well, that's all right. That's how it goes. So when was the last time that you were on the radio? How long have you been?
I think last year, probably like November or December, that was my last show.
Oh, wow. It has been quite a while.
Yeah. I think the last person I interviewed was, I hope I get his name right, it was Peter Riddell, and he's the vocals and synths guy for Wax Chattels.
Oh, okay.
And he started his own solo project called Sulfate, and he was doing a show in Dunedin. So I was just like interviewing him about that. But yeah, we did some pretty good interviews like throughout our time there. I think our most exciting one was when we tracked down Ben Lummis.
No kidding. Mr. New Zealand Idol.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He Hennessy found him and got in touch with him, and we managed to get him on air.
That's awesome.
And he
So was he in Dunedin at the time, or had you?
No, it was just a
remote
phone
call?
interview. So
Okay.
like she had, I'm pretty sure this is the story, but she had messaged him drunk been like, Ben, where you at? Like, where did you go?
What happened to you?
Yeah, essentially, because he had like one hit single and then it's kind of disappeared off the radar.
Yeah,
But
that
he was
is true,
so
eh?
big in New
Yeah,
Zealand. Like,
right.
he was massive.
Because that was the first New Zealand Idol, like first season of New
First
Zealand Idol
ever.
there was, wasn't it? So that
Yeah.
was like such a novelty in itself to be the first New Zealand Idol.
Yeah. And it was like, that was when like American Idol was like huge as well. Like that was probably at the peak, and then New Zealand Idol was like a thing for a few seasons. And then we just interviewed him about like what he'd been up to essentially since the show. And
what was the answer?
he's got a family now.
How old is he?
I don't actually know. I have no idea.
I presume he would have been like in his 20s when he won.
I think it might have even been younger, like slightly younger, like 20 or like 19 or something like that. So it was like he was saying how bizarre it was, like really, really strange to suddenly have everyone in New Zealand recognise you.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a pretty,
for sure. It's a pretty strange experience,
yeah.
eh?
I mean, it's a pretty small country as it
Yeah.
is, so everyone just been like, Ben Lummis! And he was saying how he'd go to Mitre 10, like,
Yeah.
and just be like bombarded with people.
God, how frustrating that would be, eh?
Yeah. And what else did we find out?
Surely there's some interesting... I mean, what is he doing for a career? He obviously didn't do anything more with music.
I actually don't remember. I'm pretty sure he started working at a Rise like church, so he's quite a Christian man.
Yeah.
And I feel like the only other thing I remember about the interview was that he really, really loves Lisa's original hummus. So much so that Lisa's got in touch with Ben and Hennessy after the show and sent them both like a fuck ton of hummus.
No shit. That's so funny.
So that was pretty fun. And we were meant to like organise a comeback show for him, like in Dunedin, and then I just
to play his one song.
just that one song. And then that just kind of never ended up
fizzled out again. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. So how do you, this is sort of maybe breaking the fourth wall question, but
Okay.
How do you conduct like an interview? What is your, when you know you're going to be talking to Ben Lummis, like are you just sort of off the cuff? Like was it you and Hennessy that were orchestrating the question?
I feel like I'm, like for me, I would get really anxious before an interview unless I had like set questions that I could go through, and I had done like a bunch of research beforehand. Whereas I guess Hennessy and my like slightly different interviewing styles kind of complemented each other, because I would have like sort of like questions about I don't know, generally just like about their work and like their like if their upbringing had anything to do with like
more straightforward question.
Yeah, I guess so. And I remember asking him like how it felt to just suddenly be like catapulted into the spotlight of New Zealand and stuff like that. Whereas I think Hennessy preferred doing like curveball questions. So like with like us bouncing off each other was pretty good.
Yeah, that's cool. It makes it exciting.
Yeah, and then we ended up having to fill 2 different slots last year, so we had to like separate, sadly. So I started just getting a little bit more comfortable with interviewing artists and stuff, but I still had to have like a list of questions.
Had to be prepared, Yeah, especially when it's live, you got to be like, right, how do we not make this
especially
awkward?
when it's live. Yeah. But generally, like most artists are like pretty excited to talk about their work, and that, I mean, I'm sure you find as well, like conversation just kind of starts flowing a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting thing to really have to keep a conversation going, and what you learn about people and how you teach yourself how to actually listen.
Yeah.
Because the thing I found with doing this is that I can't have any breaks, though it's not live like a radio show would be. I do have the perk of being able to sort of edit things afterward, but I still have to like find how to get past those breaks, and whether like to sort of stop and let people continue talking, or whether you just sort of like just try and go and go and go.
Yeah,
it's interesting, like seeing how people react to how conversations sort of weed away, or like how I think in some cases, like I think if you're interviewing, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like with interviewing people in the creative field, which is what I'm trying to achieve here, some people perhaps don't like talking about themselves so much, or don't even know how to actually like explain what it is that they do.
Yeah.
Because I struggle with that. I know if people ask me about painting, I don't really know, like it's not that deep for me. So I never really know how to give sort of an elaborate answer on something like that. Have you come across that with interviewing people?
Sometimes, yeah. I had a few people who had never been interviewed before. So I was like the first person. And usually it would be a live show, so they'd be doubly as nervous.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess I generally found myself like saying a little disclaimer before we went on air, like just if the microphones freak you out, just like, no, it's easier said than done, but just like pretend none of this equipment is in the room. It's literally just you and me. We're having a conversation. And yeah, people would usually loosen up a few questions and like,
that's it. Once you get over that first hurdle and you just realize, oh, okay, we are just talking like there's not that much pressure. Yeah.
And I think it definitely matters how like people can phrase questions as well. Like, I think there is a way that can be quite intimidating for creative people to like kind of have so much pressure trying to describe their work and themselves like in a few sentences. Whereas like if you ask them kind of like, I guess like loose inspirations and like, you know, like how certain things
what does it mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. Things like that, I feel like they would generally kind of freak people out a little bit.
Yeah.
Unless they were used to interviews and stuff.
Yeah, it's much easier to ask questions like, so when did you get started and that sort of thing, rather than being like, so tell me what this means and what it's all about. Because it's really hard. Yeah, because for someone that might be all that the work's about, they might have such a deep meaning or story to something that it is easy for them to just go, yeah, well, this is when such and such happened, or this is how I feel when rah, rah, rah.
Yeah.
But for someone who's purely just like creating in the visual art world, someone that's just making something to be seen, like myself, for example, because I just know this is how I think about this sort of stuff when I'm trying to explain it, it is just like as literal as just painting something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like, okay, well, I have this feeling about this, or I have this story that I want to tell, or this, this image that I want to present to the world, which does have its sort of second meaning in that sense. But yeah, sometimes it doesn't. Like it seems like there's this stigma around paintings that they have to have some sort of meaning, and it's weird exhibiting things and then having people go to you, oh, well, this one's interesting. What does this mean?
Yeah.
It's like well, I mean, sometimes the point is to, create something that you can interpret. It's not necessarily the artist going, this is what this means, this is how you should see it.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you going to look at this? Especially if it's something more abstract, it's different if you've just painted like a landscape or something that people know, because that in itself it has meaning, whereas like something a bit more out there, I suppose, people are going to be like, so what is this about? And you want sometimes people to just make a story up for their own, because that's what sells art, right?
Well, I guess that's what art is, and a lot of artists have kind of never really spoken about like what their specific arts are about, or like what specific pieces are about, but it's up for interpretation. Like, I don't know, this is going to sound real cliche, but I feel like a lot of Banksy's work is up for interpretation as well.
Absolutely.
Like literally all artists, like there is an element of that.
Yeah, for sure. And in that
always.
case, where you don't even really know who the artist is, you're really separating the art from the artist as well. So you don't really have any sort of story to go off, except that is a big story in itself, I suppose. But like you're really seeing the work for what it is. Yeah. And to not be able to get an answer for what the meaning of the work is sort of adds to the art itself,
Yeah.
Have you had much experience with that? Like, how do you see it? Well, I'm going to ask you that question. How do you feel about your work? Do you find, like, I suppose you've worked in quite a few different mediums though, haven't you?
Yeah. So for the last wee while, I feel like I've kind of leaned more towards like doing illustrations and more like design stuff. So like things based around a brief, or like with a purpose, because I feel like I can work easier or in that specific medium when I have like a purpose for something, instead of as much as I would love to get into digital artwork and stuff, I find that if I don't have a purpose for something, then I can't quite finish something to the standard that I'd like to.
Right. Purely in the digital sense?
Both, I guess, yeah, like on all mediums. I think I really struggle with not having like a purpose for, like, even if I am making art, if I can't find a purpose for it, or if it's not for a brief or anything like that, I generally can't quite, like I struggle trying to navigate finishing like a piece.
Right.
Which is, yeah. And I think when I sit down and I like try to do something more just in terms of like illustrating and making something look like aesthetically pleasing, that in itself I feel like is a brief. So
oh, okay.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You were saying before about how you're having a wee bit of a block at the moment. Do you think that has been a big part in your block, or is it purely you were saying your study is something that's affected that too?
Well, I feel like, I'm not really generally. I'm still trying to figure out this artist block that I've been experiencing. But yeah, I mean, I have done a few briefs like over the last few months, and I feel like I navigate those fine. But when it's something for myself, like if I'm trying to do something for myself or paint something for myself, I can't quite. I don't really know what it is, but
you can't grasp the end result because it's your own opinion rather than someone else's.
Like I think the last kind of like art work that I did was the show I did with or the Jonathan Waters show that I
that
was
collaborative one.
Yeah, so that piece.
I love that piece.
Oh, thanks.
So
Yeah, that was like, I feel like that had a brief in itself. And so I found it like easier to kind of finish it off. And my work style is like super strange. Like I can't sit down and like work through something like gradually. Like I either sit down for like 3 hours and bang it out and like finish it, or I don't
sitting on it for ages.
Yeah, don't touch it for like literal years.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's pretty frustrating trying to make myself do things consistently because I just can't quite seem to, and I don't really know what it is, but if I sit down and if I'm like in that kind of headspace, I can just like pump out work.
Yeah, right.
So I guess it's like, yeah.
Interesting. And it's a really interesting concept.
Not
Because
really
I feel
sure
like
why.
I feel like it's usually the other way around. The way I think about that situation, if I was having to make work for someone else, I feel like it would never be done. You
Yeah.
know? Whereas when I do it for myself, I find I get results pretty quickly because, you know, I'm in control. I know what I want it to look like. Whereas when you're doing something, I've never had the experience of doing anything for it. Actually, no, that's not true. I have done one commission, which was fine. But I think generally speaking, I would want to, because you have no idea about what the person really thinks.
Right.
You feel like sometimes it gets to a point where you're either just doing too much and you're not achieving it, or you've sort of just come to a point where the person who wants something, or, you know, whatever it's for, has just sort of come to the conclusion, oh, well, that's good enough, sort of thing. Yeah. At least that's how I interpret how they would interpret it, which sounds ridiculous. But yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how, when you're in a zone where you can just sort of like put in a whole afternoon to just sort of getting that work out, is that in itself sort of the purpose that you're...
I don't really know. It's just literally been like how I've been able to make work for myself, or like if I want to make something just for the hell of it, or like for no other purpose than like for me, that's been like the only way that I can do things.
Right.
And it's been that way since I was like a child. Like if I'm not feeling it, I can't do it.
Yeah, and fair enough. You can't be expected to do what you do all the time as well.
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes it's healthy to actually not do anything for a while and sort of find the joy in it again by coming back to it.
I think there's a weird stigma in this generation in particular that you need to like monetize off your joys and your passions. So I think I found that quite like I found through that way of thinking, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and then when I wasn't achieving those goals, I would get quite self-conscious about my work, and then like, you know, put less of it out there, and then gradually just kind of like stop making work that I like actually enjoy for myself, and then just keep kind of thinking like, is this what people want to see, or like is this what like how I want people to see my artwork? And so I've been over the last year or so, I've been trying to like separate these two different ways of working in my head, like coming from like a designer's point of view, where you are given a brief and you're given like, you know, someone's problem, and you're like having to solve it through your own creativity and your mediums and stuff, and then like trying to separate that from like your own artists, like your own creativity and your own thoughts and your own kind of way of working. So that's been a bit of a struggle, because I've found that those two kinds of ways of working have always kind of intersected with me. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like there are two different ways that I've figured out that I work in. So trying to like kind of keep myself happy with doing both of those.
Yeah, because you want to be able to create the work as organically as possible without the thought of having to sell that and profit from that. But you also need that too. Yeah. If that's solely what you're doing, you need to be able to make money back from what you're making so that you can make more of it, you know?
Yeah, like everyone has rent to pay, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. That's what it is. But yeah, that's interesting. I think, I don't know how I think in that regard, like, because for me, like the joy for me in making art is purely just in the process of it. So sometimes it's not even like what the end result is like. It's just some days I just like painting, you know. So it makes it even more gratifying when it gets to the point where someone does want to purchase off you, which sort of incentivizes the next one. So then you kind of already have that thought of, you know, making it to be sold, especially once you've sort of on like a roll. If you're selling quite a few, then you're thinking about that a lot. And I think subconsciously sometimes you will cater things to a certain type. Like if you know there's a certain type of work that you know has sold well, you're potentially a bit more inclined to do more of that work because you know it's something that's going to like get back to you, you know?
Yeah.
But I suppose the only real way to sort of solidify that process in which you are fully ingrained in the work itself and it's purely organic and there's no intention of it going elsewhere or having any sort of profit return from it. I imagine it's quite tricky to achieve. You'd have to pretty much like remove yourself from social media and things like that, so you're not sort of like inclined to share bits of the process and just fully just do it for what it is, which I think, like you say, these days is tricky because a lot of people want to be able to make careers off what they love doing, which is definitely more achievable, but that's usually what's on everyone's mind is how do I make money from doing this, you know.
But like how else are you meant to do that in the world that we live in today?
Exactly.
Like how else can you spend the rest of your working years like doing what you love, you know, like running on your own schedule and you know, making work and everyone like loves it and you're able to support yourself and not having to worry about like putting a roof over your head and like, you know, affording food and all that stuff. So yeah, it is like I guess it's kind of a struggle of like whether you do want to like make it something that you like enjoy doing as a hobby, or if you actually want to like, I guess what people say, make it, like, you know, if you really want to make it or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of been something that I've been thinking about the last few years or so. Just kind of been like, I don't know really where I want to go. I feel like I'm just thinking way too deeply about
but that's okay though.
And
I mean that's sort of how you stumble into a block because you really start to like interrogate yourself and like the way in which you should be doing the things that you're doing. But I think what it comes down to is just like even if you're thinking too hard about it, as long as you end up coming back to the work, you sort of know it's meant to be doing what it's doing, you know, it's going to find its own channel of how it's going to work out for you. But yeah, it is easy to get lost in thoughts like that and be like, because that can affect how you feel about the work itself as well. If you're thinking too much about how it's going to like turn out for you, I suppose. Yeah. And I think it's a bit unfortunate that like when you're young, like people our age that are paying rent and things like that. And I suppose it's the same if you're paying off a mortgage and that sort of thing as well, like being able to afford to live, you know. You sort of have to, it'd be nice to be able to just fully immerse yourself in doing the work. But the sad reality is it's just not feasible, especially in New Zealand, I think, which might be a broad claim, but, you know, it's not a super, super artsy country, I don't think. I think a lot of what art is to a lot of people is just sort of relating to things. So you see a lot of art that people, you know, it is very New Zealand and people come here to sort of, you know, tourists will come here and purchase art because it is based around New Zealand. So if for people that are in an artistic field that's a bit sort of broader, I suppose, or out of the norm, there's not a huge market for that sort of work. And your only real clientele is people that are your age or like your friend group. And at this sort of age, when we're a lot younger, not a lot of your friends can afford to buy your work. So it's just sort of this vicious cycle in a way, or just it's just not realistic to think that you can actually seriously start a career and do nothing else, just do the work, because you'd have to be, I don't even know how you'd achieve that. That'd just be such luck. You'd have to have just so many connections and just know that your work will sell for so much to get you by for so long.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the reality is for all artists is that they will be either studying or working part-time alongside that just to fund their day-to-day stuff and a wee bit of what they need to be able to produce the work as well.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
I know, right? That's what I've been thinking for the last wee while. Like, oh my God, there's so much to think about.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting what you say about New Zealand kind of not being a big place for artists, because even things like murals, like a lot of murals that are not too sure about, but Dunedin, but I know that after the earthquake, like a lot of the murals that popped up in Christchurch, a lot of them were commissioned like artists from overseas, like majority of them actually, which is quite interesting because there's there's like a lot of New Zealand artists that are like well within like, you know, that it is achievable. Like we have so many amazing
artists. Would it not
artists.
be easier to get a local artist to do a mural? And...
Would that not make more sense?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and there's definitely like an art community in New Zealand, don't get me wrong, but like if you compare it to somewhere like New York, like the history that somewhere like New York has had in the art world, it's vastly different. Like you can't look at a city like that from New Zealand and go, oh, okay, that's, you know, young artists do succeed, and, you know, you hear backstories about all these successful artists have come up from just doing painting, but there's a huge market for that kind of work there, not so much here. So you do have to be as broad as you can, and it usually means bringing like a whole business sort of mindset into it as well. Yeah, which I've found that's sort of my brain before the work. Like I typically try to think about like I want to be able to do what I do full time. And to me, the only way to achieve that is to look at it. It is a business in its own sense, but you have to look at it like that in the most literal sense. You're making a product to be sold and to make profit from, if you want that to be a career. But that mindset sort of affects the work. Like I think about that too much. I'm like, well, you know, if I just turn in, I don't know. It's and now we're both in this cycle trying to figure out how the proper way to do it.
How much of like a rabbit hole it is.
Exactly.
Like there's so many different like things to think about as well, and like it's so hard to not let it like eat you. Out from the inside out, because it's just like all consuming. I guess I'm trying to like unlearn all of these things that I've kind of been like told from when I was younger, because I grew up in a family where it was like all creative things weren't like anything that you could live off. Essentially, like being creative wasn't going to put food on the table. And coming from like a first generation. Like I'm first generation, like Kiwi Korean, so like my family immigrated here, and we weren't super like well off when we were younger. So it was really important for my parents to like instill in me and my brother like you need to make money essentially. You need to have a career. Like as much as you love this thing that you want to do, like you've got to put food on the table. You know. For sure. So, and like I do understand that there is like a truth in that, but there's also a lot of lies in that as well. Like people can definitely be creative and make a career out of it, but regardless of whether you want to make a career out of it or not, that is something, like if that's something you want to pursue, then that should be something you pursue. So this is something that I've just kind of been like unlearning over the last few years, especially like seeing a lot of people I know like just complete like thriving, doing the things that they love, like is really, really inspiring. Like Mari Mermaid, like Jess Thompson.
For sure.
Yeah,
really well.
Seeing her just like getting so much recognition all over the country for like doing something that she called a hobby, like literally like 2 years ago, and doing like seeing her do awesome, amazing, important work. Seeing people like that, like
it can be done.
Yeah,
it definitely can be done.
Coming out of Dunedin as well just makes you real proud, and like
for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think to go back to what we were talking about, like the meaning in work. In her case, I think there is a lot of meaning, so that sort of carries it with it as well. You know, there's a lot of work to be shown, but there's also a lot of meaning and story behind the work that's being presented as well. So that sort of carries its own thing, which helps sort of, I guess, bring attention to the cause, I suppose, and whatever case it may be. But yeah, I think you're going to end up having to, you know, it's definitely achievable, and I think there's more realistic ways of achieving it. Like, I mean, myself, for example, I still have to work part-time to be able to keep up what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think the goal there is just to continue what I'm doing outside of work and still put in as much time of it as I can in the time that I'm given.
Yeah.
And then sort of have it on the side, so to speak. You want to fully immerse yourself in it, but if you can keep it on the side and be good at your time management and actually produce the work as much as you can in the time that you have while still working as well, then that you might find that it just takes off on its own, and then you can shift into it rather than just solely going in from day one trying to be an artist. You're not realistically going to have a good outcome. Obviously, in some cases that has worked out for some people, but a lot of the time it's just who you know and what sort of demographic your work reaches as well.
Yeah,
because it could be so niche that no one here, again back to the New Zealand argument, really understands what it's about and might be intriguing to a lot of people, but do people want to invest in it, because that's what you'd need to in order to keep doing it, and make a living from it, because you can't really live on just making art if you're not selling anything, which is this sad reality. But it's cool when you can push it into like fields like, say, graphic design, where you can actually have a career in that. And if you can like translate that art to other people that actually need that sort of on a continual basis, then they're good pathways to sort of go down. But is that the same as sort of being fully immersed in the work?
Yeah.
I keep coming back to that phrase, and I hope that was what you were sort of trying to say before, being able to just purely do the art for self.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like that's the goal for me, is like to get to a place where I'm able to make work like purely for my own sake, and not to make something just look aesthetically pleasing, but to like actually have a purpose with my work and like enjoy doing it as well. Because I like when I have done work for myself, like I just get fully in the zone, and like I feel like a minute's gone by. It's been like 6 hours or something,
sure.
like that. Like I love doing that. Fucking love doing that. That's like one of my favorite things to do. So I guess like keeping that aspect and separating that from my like kind of designing mindset, where I'm like, what do people want to see?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
What do I want to convey with this? Like, because graphic design is all about how people are going to see your work and like see like what you're designing and what the purpose is for it. Like if you're creating a poster for something, like it's not really you. It's like it's this like a event that's happening, and you're trying to portray that through your creativity, but it's not actually you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to say before, is like trying to keep those things separate in my head.
For sure. Yeah. And I suppose you still get some enjoyment though out of doing the work that's not purely your own, doing stuff for other people. Because I've seen like you did that graphic design for that musician.
Thea. Yeah. That was quite fun. So that wasn't actually like, that was quite fun because it was like, she just kind of contacted me after seeing the t-shirt design I did for Fly Spray, and she was kind of like, this is really cool. Do you want to do my name?
Yeah.
And I was like, I would love to do that. So, it was just like, I just listened to her music and then just kind of,
your interpretation on it.
Yeah, I guess, which is another thing that I really love doing, especially if it's for like a musician or an artist. Like I like to listen to them while doing it, because it just kind of like gives me a better idea of like their aesthetic and kind of like what colors pop into your head when you're listening to them. What kind of like, I think especially with words as well, I have recently really enjoyed like playing around with typography and fonts and stuff like that. Like what kind of emotions or like aesthetics do you want to portray through like the form of your words? And there's so much you can do with like just fiddling around with like the spaces in between words, or like just changing it up a little bit. Like I can make this K look completely different, but it will still read like a K.
Yeah.
And then changing the flow of like the words and the overall shape of them, and like you can essentially just make it into like more than a word. Like it's like a visual thing as well. Like it's not just.
I think they have the chance to be quite creative there and not really have come across any hurdles because, at least this is how I interpret it, when you're working with words and typography, you already have the context of what you're making there ready for. You know it's going to be this word. You just have to put your flair on it. So you've really got that freedom to just sort of like, it's almost half done in a way. Like you know what you need to achieve rather than like staring at a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper and going, right, what am I going to make from this?
Exactly.
You know, you've got that freedom to be able to do it.
And I think that's a pattern in which I feel like I have been, like I like creating in. Like I've been given like a kind of like a really brief, like a brief kind of, or just an outline, and I can just do whatever I want.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
So that was really fun. What else have I done recently? Not really too much, to be honest.
Yeah. For other people, specifically.
Yeah, for other people, I guess. I've been trying to get more into screen printing, which is to get myself out of this rut, which has been helping a lot. I think doing things hands-on as well is just like a lot better.
A lot more satisfying, eh?
Yeah, like
I really like the digital world in that sense. So like the stuff that you create, I think is really cool, and I really admire that. But there's something about getting your hands dirty and making things like that too. It's a whole nother thing.
Getting ink like under your fingernails.
So
and stuff.
good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really makes you feel something.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could find, like, obviously this is something that your thoughts are that you're battling at the moment, but I'm sure there's a way you can easily have a side of you that is doing the work purely for you and not sort of, I guess, advertising it or putting it out there or thinking about other people in that regard too much, and have that channel and create a workflow on its own and sort of accumulate work in that way, and then still have that side of you that's doing the work for others, because it sounds like you sort of get different feelings out of either work, right? You
definitely.
sort of feel one way when you're doing this, feel another way when you're doing that, and then the stuff that you do for other people could sort of turn into the side that helps you in that sense of profit, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then what you do with the work that you're doing, that you're sort of just accumulating the stuff that you just like doing, rather than looking ahead to something that you want it to be a part of, actually looking back on it and then going, right, I've accumulated all this work that I've loved spending my time doing, and now I can exhibit it, which is probably the only realistic way an artist can sort of get their work out there, is to display it in a way that makes sense to how it was all formed, and have it not just be something that you post online and say, here's something, anyone want to buy this sort of thing, because then that sort of creates a weird feeling around the process as well. And I guess that's the real work you have to put in, I suppose, is looking for spots and places that you can exhibit your work in, because I think it's a lot easier to form an exhibition based by rounding things up rather than going, I know I've got something ahead, and making work for it, because then you're just back to that square one of going, all right, well, I have to make something that's cohesive, and I have to make it somewhat for people to enjoy, if you're thinking about that as well, and for profit too, because presumably you're going to be selling the pieces that are in the exhibition. So I personally would think it would be easier to backtrack on work that you've accumulated through that process of being like organic and just like doing it because you want to do it, and doing it on your time, and putting that work into it.
Exactly. And that's how I want to work. I want to be able to like just do whatever I want to do, and like not feel any kind of pressure from anyone else, or like what I think of anyone else as well. I feel like that would be like the most authentic form of the art that I would be able to make, and I feel like that's the ultimate goal for me. I just really want to make authentic art, and I'm really curious as to see like what I would make as well. So at the moment, I guess I'm just like learning a whole different bunch of mediums, trying to learn more in like the digital aspect of things, trying to get more into 3D modeling, but it's a lot to it. So,
yeah, for sure. One step at a time, I suppose, right?
Yeah, and but also trying to learn more like hands-on kinds of techniques
It's
as
nice
well.
to broaden the things that you do so that
Yeah.
you don't sort of get tired of the one thing. You think you love something and then you eventually will get to a point where you're like, right, I've done this so much. Like, what else can I do?
Yeah.
And there's so many things in the creative field that you can get your hands on, whether it's physical or digital or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's so many pathways you can go down.
Exactly.
And that in turn can make a better result for the other things. You know, if you spend the time away from one medium and another and find that you love doing that as well, and then you can cycle back to the other one and go, all right, now I can sort of take some sort of meaning that I've taken from this. Like, I feel like if you're working in digital or just on paper or canvas and then working with like 3D sculpture and ceramic jewellery, that sort of thing, there's a lot of that you can translate back to the canvas, because you're sort of working with different shapes and form factors and aesthetics and ideas through that. And it probably goes both ways, you know, but that's probably the best way someone could be better at something else that they do, is by doing something else.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the best way to explain that sentence, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
I think a lot of creatives and artists should have a couple mediums that they try it, because being able to switch back and forth between the two has their own feel and sort of keeps it fresh, you know, and that just means that if you ever get tired of something, you got something else you can sort of fall back on, and vice versa, rather than just sort of honing in on the one thing and then getting sort of tired of it and losing interest straight away. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I'll never get tired of like learning how to do something, like learning how to do something new, like a new medium or something. Like, I always find it super exciting.
Absolutely.
I get, quite like overwhelmed with like thinking about what I want to do with like a new medium, because there's just so many possibilities, you know.
Absolutely.
It's literally infinite. And I find that really exciting. So like learning how to screen print, or, you know, how to 3D model, I think there's just like, it just kind of sparks that joy in you again. Like, you just want to like get out there and just like spend all of like a few days just straight, just working on that thing.
And I think, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Okay, so you were saying how, it's good to try your hand at as many things as you can, and I agree, and I love the learning new things. What I have really dabbled in is stuff that I know I can achieve on my own. Do you think that you're in that same boat? Like, you've sort of mainly just done things that you could sort of do from home, but then sort of had to go into, you know, like these night classes and things to learn the 3D printing and the jewellery, the slightly more complex things that not everyone would really have access to those
Yeah, I mean, like,
facilities.
In my ideal world, I would have like access to all of the materials and
Naturally
equipment that I'd need, but we do not live in a world like that. So I would really love one day to own like a old school like printing press.
Oh yeah,
because I love printmaking so much. But and it's like quite sad not being able to do printmaking from home, you know, because it's something that I've really, really loved doing. Like, I've never got tired of doing it. And I also wonder if that's like a part of my kind of like artist block as well, just not being able to have access to these things again. Like, in high school, you have like all these computers, all this fancy equipment, all these cameras, printing presses, paintbrushes. Like, you've got everything there. You can just do whatever you want, so long as you're obviously in the class, which is what I did. And then I guess not having access to those things again and being quite limited to pen and paper, because that's all I really had. So I found that quite I guess difficult, trying to hone in all my creativity into like one medium.
for sure.
Like, and then obviously like getting paints gradually, and then I mean, like, saved up to buy a nice computer that can actually like handle quite a few programs and stuff like that, and then like getting those programs, or like buying those programs and learning how to use those. So yeah, I guess
Doesn't all come that easy, eh?
no, it doesn't. It's kind of satisfying though, having to work for it. Like,
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
nice.
Yeah.
Like, you get to kind of appreciate it more.
Yeah,
Like, I guess you feel the
100%.
same
Yeah,
about
I
this
agree.
whole setup as well.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure. Yeah. It's nice putting in the
Yeah.
long term work to get to.
Sorry.
You're whacking all my
Yeah,
equipment as we
sorry.
talk about.
Yeah,
No, you're right.
all
That's
this
fine. You feel free to move that as much as you want.
Yeah.
With printing in particular, I find it is quite awkward, especially because like I had a wee nosy on your Instagram. You've had some etching prints that you've done in the past. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that is one that that's probably the only sort of printing that I've ever done. And the really niggly part about etching dry point printing is that you really have to have like a printing press, and those things are not like a dime a dozen, like, and they're super rare to come across as well. You basically have to like go somewhere that has a press to be able to do the work, and that is really kind of annoying and tricky because you have to sort of almost take all your gear there to do it. It's not your own space, you're sort of on someone else's time.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, how have you done etching prints in the past?
I mean, I haven't. Those things were from high school, which was when
right. So it was all there for you.
Yeah.
Again.
There's only one. I believe there's only like one way of doing printmaking from home, which is like when you have a piece of paper and you like ink up the back and then put talcum powder on top, and then you like flip it over onto another piece of paper, like slightly damp piece of paper.
Are we talking like woodcut prints, or are you talking
just like paper?
etching?
Yeah, etchings.
Yeah,
and then
right.
you literally just need paper, ink, and talcum powder, and then whatever you press onto the like top piece of paper, it'll come out on the other side. That's the only etching you can do.
Talcum
like
powder. You're gonna have to teach me that, because I was just gonna ask, like, this is the thing that I've been trying to figure out how to do. So the way I was doing them, I was I do the etching, apply the ink to the etching plate, dampen the paper, put the paper on top, and then I'd put like a fine piece of like acrylic or like sort of real thin plastic over top, and then wooden spoon, like real press really hard, which is insanely tiring. Like even just like smaller than A4 size, that you have to apply so much pressure.
So much,
that like the result is fantastic, but my God, I could do like one a month because it was just that tiring. And I've tried to find other ways to do it, you know, creating like vice grips and trying to like apply as much pressure as I can, but you can't do it without a print. So talcum powder, that's interesting.
Nothing quite does it like a printing press. But yeah, the talcum powder technique is like, so you don't actually have an etching pre-made is the thing. So like it's literally like 2 bits of plain paper, and then you ink up one side, put talcum powder all over it, flip it over on top of the other paper, and then whatever you draw into that, it'll come out. So it's like it's kind of
like a third-party way of doing the print, right?
Kind of like we learned it like at the end of the year, like it was just like a real brief kind of thing, because I don't think a lot of people use that technique. It still is considered like a printmaking technique, but it's I mean, like it's, why would you do that when you've got a printing press?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, well, my teacher was like a painting teacher, so he had used this technique quite a fair bit as well. But it does come in handy before. But yeah, like I said, nothing beats a printing press, and just like
100%.
That feeling of not knowing what's going to come out on the other side.
Yeah, I was just going to say the best part about printing is getting the result like then and there. Like you put all the work and you kind of don't really see. I mean, you obviously see the work as if you're whatever you're doing, if it's woodcut or screen print or etching, whatever. Like you obviously are making the pattern, so there's work in that. But lifting the paper up or whatever, or having it pulled through the press and lifting it up and seeing that is immensely satisfying, because
best
like
feeling in the
world. Because like with a painting, you're watching it sort of grow, so there's not sort of that element of surprise, I suppose. It's sort of just a suspenseful process where you can tweak things finitely as you sort of go along, whereas the print's just like, whew, done.
It is a pretty shit feeling when you put like hours of work into an etching, and then it comes out like looking like total dog shit, and you're like, no.
Easily done, eh? I was when I first started practicing with them, I didn't realize that you really had to be quite specific with the ink you use. So I ended up buying a water-based ink. Oh, no. And because I was blotting the paper, it just went everywhere, and that was extremely unsatisfying.
Learn from your mistakes, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the process, right? You go through this trial and error phase until you finally get it. It's like,
And often, even if you're like make a mistake and you realize it's a mistake, sometimes the end product just like looks even like, I don't know, just something you totally were not expecting at all.
Yeah.
But it's like,
Just
I
adds
could
to
work
it.
with this.
Yeah,
I could definitely
absolutely.
work with this.
Yeah, and printing is one of those things where you have that, I guess there's that part of the process that can occur. Whereas with painting, it's all you know.
Yeah.
And same with photography. Sometimes a photo can come out real whack. And you're like,
Exactly.
actually, that's kind of sick.
Yeah,
Like, especially with film and that sort of things, you get funny lines and like blurs and
I've
things.
been
and
like,
you're like,
doing double exposures as well.
Yeah,
like, it's always
yeah,
like,
for sure.
You never know what's going to come out. Like, so that's pretty cool.
so, have you ever dabbled in photography?
I did used to take some film photos back in the day.
And you wanted to get into darkroom stuff too, eh?
Yeah, I wanted to. I'm not unsure if I have the time for it at the moment. But
Again, it's one of those things you kind of have a darkroom.
yeah, exactly. And all those chemicals and stuff.
Yeah,
like
for
that.
sure.
No, I've been trying to get back into film photography as well. Just like make it a habit of taking my camera like everywhere with me where I go, and like if I see something I like, I'll take a photo of it. But for me personally, it's not like the medium that I guess I find I translate the best with, but it definitely comes in handy. Like I like fiddling around with photos on like Photoshop and then like adding different layers to it, or like adding a drawing on top of a photo or things like that. So I find those kinds of things quite satisfying. But yeah, I guess photography is not really my calling, but it is a fun hobby.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I since having to buy a camera for this podcast, I've just been playing around just because it's such a compact camera. I can take that around everywhere, and it's nice to whip it out here and there and take photos and that sort of thing. I love photography as its own medium in the art world, because I feel like a lot of what art is doing in the visual art world, when you're painting or whatever it is, often is imitating life, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of that stuff is sort of derived from sort of life experience and that sort of thing. Whereas photography is that in its most literal sense. Like it is translating that in its most literal form. But to be able to do it in a way where you're sort of orchestrating things to achieve a result rather than applying things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like to be able to organize, say, a photo shoot, and you know where you want to be and like who you want to have in it, if it's going to be a figurative photo. I just find that really satisfying. Like, because figures are a key thing in my work. I pretty much always have a figure of some kind in my work.
Yeah.
So in photography, I feel like you achieve the result a lot quicker because you have the figure there in a way, rather than trying to create one. I don't know, I just find it a fascinating field. I think it seems so simple but also so complex at the same time, and just the things you can achieve with photography I think is really fascinating. And like my point before about like if you're using film, having funny blotches and lines and sort of just funny colors and things pop up, if it's an old camera or whatever it is you do to achieve that result, I don't know, it just has a feeling to it that
definitely.
painting and the visual art just doesn't give. And I think it's something I want to get into later on in life. Probably can do now, of course, but like I think there's so much to it. I don't know.
I find that the same with like a lot of mediums as well, though. Like it's a completely new way of like portraying your creativity.
Yeah, definitely.
It does get overwhelming, like, whoa.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose my story goes both ways in that regard. Like you can't really compare photography to painting in some sense of that.
Yeah. I know. I guess I have a special place in my heart for photography as well. It's just something that I like. I'm not very good at, but a lot of protests in particular. So like a kind of subcategory of photography where a lot of people take photo or like artistic photos in protests, and like the amount of like you just capture all of these like really strong emotions and like people's like facial expressions and like the anger and like frustration you feel, all of that captured in like a split moment. It's like beautiful. It's super, super cool.
Definitely. And the thing with that as well, there's another thing I like about photography is sometimes it's just chance. Like sometimes just being in the right place in the right time and being able to capture certain moments like that just adds a whole thing. Like it's, it can be as simple as point and shoot, but like to be in that moment and capture the emotion of people in that scenario is a pretty crazy thing to be able to have that.
It's like a level of intuitiveness that I think a lot of like the world's like most renowned photographers have, is like just knowing the exact right moment to like and like knowing. I guess it's also like the person themselves as well, because a lot of photographers will be like pretty. I mean, a lot of them are characters, you know, but like if you really get someone to open up to you and you like capture that moment and like you know the exact split moment to take that photo, that's like a gift in itself, you know.
100%.
You can't learn that. Like,
Yeah.
people
And
are
like
born with
you can have those as a memory too for like your lifetime, but
Yeah.
memories fade and aren't always forever, and to be able to actually like establish that in a physical format almost, you know, like if you were to physically print that photo, you can have a physical capture essentially what a photo is of that, which I think is really intense.
Yeah.
Well,
It's very cool.
can be intense, but like I guess generally speaking is quite an interesting thing to be able to do and do right, you know.
Yeah, definitely. No, photography's cool.
Well, Yujin, we've done an hour. I think that was that was time flies, right?
Wow. Oh, yeah.
Don't want to keep you up for too long. I really appreciate you coming on. This is really fun.
Yeah,
You have
thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Kieran. This
really
has been
interesting insights into the art world.
Yeah,
Very
sorry
fascinating.
if I talked too much about my
absolutely
artist
not.
blog.
Absolutely not. Well, that's one of the things I want to be able to talk to people about, you know, because I've had a few people saying, well, you know, I don't have a lot to really talk about because I haven't been doing much recently.
Yeah.
But the thing that fascinates me is why? What is that?
It's because you
happen
can't
for you, you know?
you can't put a rush on good art. You know, you can't
exactly.
rush creative people because
Good things take time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if you want things to be like your true, like if you want things to convey your like true, authentic self, I think it takes time. And you know what? We're all still super young, so like we have our own whole lives to
Absolutely.
like do all the things that we want
Absolutely.
to do. And yeah, I think that's a pretty special thing to have, like just gradually working on something.
Definitely. Word to the wise. What a way to end it. All right.
Fine.
Awesome. Thanks again, Yujin.
Thanks
Bye,
for having
everyone.
me, Kieran.
Awesome. That was
Whoa.
awesome.
Woo. That did not feel like an hour. What the hell?
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Home audio entertainment.
9016 Radio.
The show for artists of all kinds.
Sit down, relax, enjoy the music.